I'm Mr. MegaManFan and welcome back to the Retro Hunting Adventures. On a previous episode, we showed you how to jailbreak the Analogue NT Mini Noir version 2. Today, we're going to jailbreak the Analogue Super NT. First thing you need is a micro SD card. I recommend SanDisk, but any prominent brand will do, and you'll need to format it to FAT32 either on Mac OS or Windows, and then get the GitHub zip file in the URL just pictured. You'll know you're at the right page if it looks like this. Once you've downloaded the zip file, take only the firmware file in that zip file and put it in the root directory of your SD card. Put it in your Super NT while it's powered off, and then turn it back on. Wait a few minutes, and it will look something like this when you're through. Now, you're not done just yet, but you can at least look at the new menu options that the jailbreak has provided you. You've got Browse SD Card, which is for playing any ROMs that you put on the card in the SD slot of your Super NT, or playing anything that you dump with Copy SNES, which is one of the great reasons to do this jailbreak, because you can make backup copies of any of your Super Nintendo or Super Famicom games. With one notable exception that I found. There was one game that I tried that I wasn't able to dump, but I ultimately found a different solution to that problem. Once you flash the firmware update, which takes several minutes, don't panic if it seems to be taking a while, and you verified that it works, power it off, take your SD card out, put it back in your computer, and put all of these files in a folder called BIOS. You need them for some of these ROMs. Just look around at duckduckgo.com or the search engine of your choice and you won't have any trouble finding them. Once you've done that, you can delete the firmware update from your SD card, put it back in your Analogue Super NT, and Bob's your uncle. Now you're ready to start dumping games. I have 9 Super Famicom games that we are going to test out today. First, we're going to play the physical cartridge. Then we're going to dump it and play the ROM and make sure that it's a working dump. So join me on this journey, won't you? The very first game we're going to start with is Fatal Fury 2, aka Garou Densetsu 2, which was ported by Takara from the SNK arcade game to Super Nintendo on November 26, 1993. Then it came out in North America in April 1994, and the European Union at some point later in 1994. No date specified on the Wikipedia entry, so your guess when it came out in PAL format is as good as mine. But clearly this is a tested and working cart, and this one was a bargain because the eBay seller that had it listed put it at only $1. Now obviously I had to import it, but doing a large order and then throwing in another cartridge for $1 when it only adds another 29 cents to your total shipping, worth it at that point. If you're already paying $20 for shipping, spend another 29 cents and add another $1 cart to your order, make it worth what you spent. And it looks like it's going to dump pretty easily too. It's already pulling it up as Garou Densetsu 2 before I even dump it, so obviously it's reading and detecting the ROM properly. And man, this is so much easier than the Analogue NT Mini Noir dumper. You don't have to guess which mapper you need and trial and error multiple times. It just detects the right one and dumps it and puts it right in a Copy SNES folder on your SD card. All you have to do is go back into the menu, go up one directory, go into the Copy SNES directory, select your ROM, and hit start. There you go. Wow, I didn't realize it would be that easy. Incidentally, price charting says $6.75 for a loose Super Famicom copy, so I got it for a little less than it actually goes for, but I'm sure this reseller gets so many cartridges, they're probably happy to get rid of some of their excess inventory, and it's a fairly common game. If you get the North American version of Fatal Fury 2, you're paying $15 for it loose at the high water mark. maybe a little less, but probably at least that much. So $1 is definitely a bargain by either standard. Next up, we have a game called Kishin Korenden Oni. If I mispronounced that, I apologize. It's a Bon Presto game that came out in 1994, and it's an RPG heavy on the Japanese dialogue, so I'm going to have to find a patch for it, romhacking.net or elsewhere, if I want to make any progress in the game. But before I can patch it, obviously, I've got to dump it. So first I'm testing the cart, and it certainly seems like everything is working the way it's supposed to. The lead character is moving around the screen smoothly. All the other things that should be happening are happening, so now let's see if it can dump it. And it's already detecting it properly as SPONI, so I'll keep that file name. You can, of course, change them. There is no reason that you can't create your own custom name, but if that's what it says it is, I'll go with it. Now we back out of the Copy SNES menu, go back to Browse SD card again, go up one directory, go to the Copy SNES folder, and it not only saved the game, but it also saved the battery backup memory. So this can dump your game, and it can dump your save states on your battery backed up games. So that's a double bonus. If you've got an old game where you're worried about the battery dying, dump that save file. Make sure you back up a copy of it. Then you can either take the battery out and replace it, or you can just play your backup and never even have to worry about the game or the battery ever again. But now that we've dumped this one successfully, it's time to move on to another cartridge. And this is one that I've been wanting to test ever since I got the box in the mail that had the box with this game inside, because I bought a complete in-box Super Famicom copy of Zelda, A Link to the Past, The Legend of Zelda on Super Famicom. Much cheaper complete in-box than the North American version. I mean, it's not even close. I paid about $20 complete in-box for this before shipping, and if you get the North American version, it's $30 loose and $130 complete. So you just can't go wrong buying the Japanese version. And if you wanted to, you could always patch it later on. But I've got no reason to say not play it this way, because it's the same game. It's Zelda. It's the same thing. You still collect rupees, take out monsters, and complete the quest to defeat the evil that has infected Hyrule, which is almost always Ganon, or some derivative thereof. As you can see, it plays exactly the same as the North American version of the game. It's just going to cost you a whole lot less. I mean, heck, if you buy it loose, you're not even going to spend 20 bucks. You're going to probably spend 5 or 6. It's not the cheapest Super Famicom game, but $6 compared to 20 plus? Yeah, I mean, that's worth it, especially if you're doing a large order all at once. As you can see here again, it dumped both the battery backup and the game card itself. So this Copy SNES is a breeze to use. Whoever designed the core that makes that possible, whether it was Kevtris or somebody else, I am so grateful, because I will be making backups of all of my Super Famicom games and eventually all of my Super Nintendo games as well. And then I can just play them off the SD card and not have to pull out the cartridge every single time I want to play it. I mean, this is a convenience factor here. You want to just be able to play your games on demand, like Rockman X3, for example. This is another one I got complete in box from the same seller that goes for way less than the North American version. You can spend anywhere from $20 to $40 for a complete in box copy of Rockman X3. You can spend literally hundreds of dollars on the Super Nintendo version complete minimum. It seems to have been very short printed here, so save yourself some money, because it's the same game. It's not going to be any different, other than the fact that you won't be able to read the dialogue between Rock and Zero here, but other than that, it's the same. freaking game. Now, the only problem here is that this was the one game I wasn't able to dump successfully. And I tried more than once. It seemed like it was working okay at first. It detects the card, gives you the file name, it puts it on your SD card. Seems like everything's okay. But then when I get out of this menu, go back to the SD card browser, go up to the copy SNES directory, select the ROM, and then it says this: interface register error. What does that mean? Well, it seems to be booting up. We get the Capcom logo, and then nothing. It just dies. So I tried again. I switched from low ROM to high ROM to see if that would make any difference. I really don't know what most of these options do, but I figured it was worth a shot, and I gave it a new file name so it wouldn't just overwrite the existing file and I would know which dump was which. And once again, it seems to be doing it fine. Dumps the ROM, everything seems to be in order, but then I once again found that it does nothing. It just sits there and doesn't even show me the Capcom logo. So I gave up at that point. I went looking for a ROM, and this one was apparently dumped properly, so I'll just play it this way without dumping my own copy. Apparently it's really hard to dump because there's a bad header. I guess Capcom didn't format it correctly when they put it on cartridge, either in Japan or perhaps North America too, but I don't know what settings you have to come up with to overcome the bad header. But this is a known error. I've looked around on some of the forums online, and other people are complaining about this problem as well, and the general response seems to be figure it out for yourself. But I haven't seen anybody post specific instructions on how to make copy SNES do what it's supposed to do and make a properly headered ROM, so maybe you actually have to go into a hex editor and fix it yourself. Maybe it just can't be done from the Analogue Super NT, which is a shame because everything else that I tried in this video worked on the first try, including SimEarth, which you're looking at right now. And this still amuses me because I have the PC Engine CD, Super CD ROM, and it takes 2 discs, but somehow they fit it on one Super Famicom cartridge. So either they cut it down quite a bit compared to the PC Engine PC Duo version, or they just found a way to compress it and make it all fit into one cartridge, which they got pretty good at. If you've ever watched Modern Vintage Gamer talk about Street Fighter Alpha 2 on Super Nintendo, also known as Street Fighter 02 on Super Famicom, they did an amazing job squeezing a full arcade game into a single Super Famicom cart. As you can see, my dump of SimEarth is working just fine here. Although I imagine that I'm going to need to patch this because to play a real-time develop your own planet simulator like SimCity but SimEarth, I'm probably going to need to be able to read all of the dialogue in it. Space Invaders, however, that won't be a problem. And this one was more of a novelty for me because the same seller had it for only $1, but I've already got the North American version of Space Invaders, so I thought, why not buy this cart, dump it, and see how the ROM compares to the version that I already have on cartridge. Just something to do for fun because, hey, why not? It was only $1, and I love Space Invaders anyway. I could have actually sat here and played it for several minutes instead of just testing the cartridge, pausing it, and dumping it, but I didn't want everybody to get bored with that, so I figured just take out one column of aliens and then go to copy SNES, and once again, it detects it immediately, gives it a file name that's convenient to me, and dumps it really quickly. Some of these games, it takes no time at all to dump them. I guess the files just aren't that big inside the cartridge, or the mappers aren't that complex. There's only one that seemed to take a really long time, so you'll see that one in just a minute. But again, we have a tested and working ROM here. It's that easy. Man, I can't see why you wouldn't jailbreak your Super NT. Not just for copying SNES, but the convenience of playing ROMs off your SD card. It just can't be beat. And it's not going to harm anything to jailbreak it. Analogue basically guarantees that you cannot harm your systems with the jailbreaks that are out there. The worst you could possibly do is have to revert to the default firmware and not use the jailbreak. You almost can't brick these systems. Maybe if you turned the power off while you were in the middle of flashing a firmware update, you could find some way to cause a problem. But that's about it. I can't imagine any other way other than interrupting the power during a firmware update might screw something up, but even that doesn't necessarily seem guaranteed. As you can see, I'm dumping Super Momotaro Dentetsu DX or Super Peach Boy DX, whatever you want to call it. This is another Super Famicom game, and this was probably the one that took the longest to dump out of the whole bunch, which doesn't surprise me given that this Peach Boy Legend series, the games got increasingly large and complex from one system to the next. Going all the way back to PC Engine, now we're on Super Nintendo / Super Famicom. It seems this series had quite a life in Japan, although it's virtually unknown in North America. I don't think any of the Super Peach Boy or Peach Boy games ever got localized. If they did, I'm unaware of it, but this was one that I picked up complete in box really cheap, so I was happy to add a complete Super Famicom game to my collection, even if it's an obscure one that not many people know here. Speaking of obscure, here's Sword World, which I don't believe ever got localized here either, although I'll look that up just to be sure because who knows, but it was only $1, as so many of these games were. It appears on further research that this started out as a tabletop role-playing game in Japan, but it did eventually get a bunch of video games from Teeny Soft, and there was a PC 9801 version, a Super Famicom version, and a sequel for Super Famicom a couple of years later, and then in 2009, Sword World 2.0 was released for Nintendo DS, but no record of it being translated outside of Japan. Not a problem as far as I'm concerned, because there's always some clever person out there who's made an IPS file that can patch games from Japanese to English, so I'm sure I'll be able to play Sword World at some point using a patch from romhacking.net or somewhere else, but since I know it's a working file, we can move on to the final game in this series, and it's called Wizap or Wizap. I don't even know which way you're supposed to pronounce that, but it's another Japanese exclusive role-playing game that doesn't seem to have gotten localized outside of Japan. It exists solo on its own in this format. This one is so unknown here, it doesn't even have an English Wikipedia entry, so I might be up a creek with this one. Who knows if somebody's even taken the trouble to create an English language patch for Wizap, but nothing ventured, nothing gained. It was an amusing title and a great looking box for a game, so I decided I'd go ahead and get it anyway. And you know what, with RPGs, sometimes you can just fumble your way through it. As long as you take turns attacking the monsters and vice versa, it all seems to work out fine in the end. You collect the items, you'll level up, you move on to the next area. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This has been Jailbreaking the Super NT and dumping some Super Famicom games while we're at it. See you next time.